Hey, I'm really glad you're here. Take a moment to get comfortable wherever you are. Let your shoulders relax and let the day gently fall away. You don't need to do anything right now. Just listen and let the story unfold at its own pace. Whenever you're ready, we'll begin.
The last night journey before the snow fell. The quiet road beyond the pines. The road beyond the pines had a way of keeping its own secrets. It did not announce itself on most maps. It did not hurry. It curved gently out of town like a ribbon laid down by a patient hand, slipping past the last porch light on Maple Street and wandering into the dark hush of trees that had stood longer than memory. On certain nights, when the air felt thin and waiting, the road seemed to breathe. This was one of those nights. Elias Rowan had not meant to be traveling so late. The clock on the dashboard of his old pickup truck blinked 9:47 p.m. And the small digital numbers cast a pale blue glow against the worn steering wheel. The heater hummed softly, pushing out pockets of warm air that smelled faintly of dust and cedar. A paper cup of coffee sat in the holder, forgotten and growing cold. He drove with the steady patience of a man who was not racing toward anything, only away from the day. The town behind him had already dimmed into quiet shapes. Shop signs were dark. The bakery window that usually shone golden until 10 had pulled its blinds. Even the gas station on the corner of Elm and 3rd had switched off one of its flickering lights, surrendering to the hour. Ahead, the road narrowed. Tall pines rose on either side like cathedral pillars, their branches interlacing high above to create a long, shadowed corridor. The headlights washed over bark and needle, catching silver hints of frost that had begun to form along the edges of the world. Snow was coming. Everyone had said so. The weather report on the radio that afternoon had spoken in certain tones, temperatures dropping fast, a heavy front moving in from the west, the first true snowfall of the season expected by morning. It would be the kind that quieted everything, the kind that softened the outlines of fences and folded the hills into a single white breath. Elias had always loved the first snow. He eased his foot off the gas as the truck rolled deeper into the pines. The tires hummed along the asphalt in a low, soothing rhythm. There was comfort in that sound, steady and dependable like a heartbeat. He reached to turn down the radio. A faint violin melody had been drifting through the speakers, something slow and thoughtful. He let it fade into silence. The night outside felt like music enough. The road curved gently to the right, and with it came the familiar sign, wooden, slightly crooked, painted long ago by someone with a careful hand. Quiet road, no outlet. The last word always made him smile. No outlet. As though the road simply wandered into stillness and decided to stop there. Elias had driven it many times before, though never quite like this. Not on the last night before the snow fell. Not with the peculiar sense that something was waiting, not ahead, not behind, but within the quiet itself. He was not a young man anymore. 47 had come softly and without fuss that autumn. His hair, once dark and thick, had begun to silver at the temples. His hands, resting comfortably at 10 and 2, were marked with faint scars from years of carpentry, small lines where wood and blade had met skin. He built things for a living: tables, chairs, cabinets. Sometimes, if the commission was special enough, entire rooms of carefully measured wood fitted together like a promise. He liked the steadiness of it, the way each piece required patience and care, the way something solid could rise from nothing more than thought and effort. But tonight, he was not thinking of work. He was thinking of his father. The old house beyond the pines had belonged to him once, before the winters became too much and the stairs too steep, before the hospital rooms and the soft-spoken nurses and the final quiet. Elias had not been back since the funeral. He had told himself there was no need. The house was empty now, the deed signed and stored, the furniture covered in white sheets like sleeping ghosts. Yet earlier that afternoon, as the sky lowered into a heavy gray and the air sharpened with coming frost, something had stirred in him. A simple thought, clear as breath in cold air: go back, not to fix anything, not to sell, not to carry boxes. Just to sit one more night in the house before snow laid its hand over everything. So here he was, driving the quiet road beyond the pines, letting memory move at the same unhurried pace as the truck. The trees thinned gradually, and the land opened into a wide field edged by low stone walls. The house stood at the far end, modest and sturdy, its roof sloping gently beneath the dark sky. Only one light glowed inside. Elias blinked. He was certain he had turned off the main breaker when he left months ago. He slowed the truck to a crawl, tires crunching softly over gravel as he pulled into the narrow drive. The porch light flickered once, then steadied into a warm, amber glow. For a long moment, he simply sat there. The engine ticked quietly as it cooled. The heater hummed its final breath and fell silent. Outside, the wind moved through the grass with a faint whisper, bending it in gentle waves. The house did not look abandoned. It looked expectant. Elias stepped out of the truck and closed the door with care. The cold reached him immediately, sharp but not yet cruel. It carried the clean scent of pine and earth and something faintly metallic that always came before snow. He walked toward the porch. Each wooden step creaked under his weight in a familiar rhythm. He could almost hear his father's voice. Needs sanding, Eli. Wood's like people. If you don't tend to it, it starts to complain. He paused at the door. Light spilled softly through the lace curtains in the front window. He could see the outline of the old rocking chair inside, its curved runners catching the glow. The door was unlocked. He knew it was foolish to feel surprise. He had left it locked. He remembered the click of the bolt, the way he had stood there for a moment afterward, unsure what to do with his hands. And yet, he turned the knob. The hinges opened without protest. Warmth met him, not the mechanical warmth of a heater, but the lingering comfort of a lived-in space. The scent of cedar and old books wrapped around him like a shawl. The lamp beside the rocking chair was lit. Elias stepped inside slowly, closing the door behind him. The house was just as he remembered, the braided rug beneath his boots, the small table with its uneven leg, the framed photograph of his parents on the far wall, taken on a summer afternoon long ago, both of them laughing at something just outside the frame. Dust had not gathered. The white sheets that had covered the furniture were gone. The fireplace, though unlit, had been cleared of ash. He stood very still in the center of the room. There are moments in life when fear might rise, sharp and unwelcome, but this was not one of them. Instead, there was a deep and spreading calm. It felt as though the house had been waiting for him, as though it had shaken off its loneliness in anticipation of his return. He removed his coat and draped it over the back of a chair. "I'm home," he said softly. The words did not echo. They settled. He crossed to the fireplace and knelt, arranging the stacked logs that had always been kept in the small wooden crate nearby. His hands moved from memory, paper tucked beneath kindling, match struck with a gentle scratch, flame coaxed patiently into life. Soon the fire breathed warmth into the room. Its light flickered against the walls, casting shadows that danced like old friends. Elias sank into the rocking chair. It welcomed him with a soft creak. Outside, the wind shifted. The low sigh moved through the trees, brushing against the windows with a delicate touch. The sky beyond the glass had deepened into velvet darkness. He closed his eyes for a moment. He could almost hear his father humming in the kitchen. The faint clink of a spoon against a mug, the steady cadence of boots crossing the floor. Memory is a quiet traveler. It does not rush in. It sits beside you gently, waiting to be acknowledged. Elias let it sit. He rocked slowly. Forward, back, forward, back. The rhythm was as steady as the road had been. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called, a low, rounded sound that seemed to float rather than travel. He opened his eyes again. The house felt full, though he was alone. He rose from the chair and moved toward the kitchen. The floorboards beneath him sang their familiar notes. The kettle rested on the stove exactly where it had always been. Without thinking, he filled it with water and set it to heat. The small blue flame beneath it flickered into life. He found the chipped mug with the faded pine tree painted on its side, his father's favorite. He held it in his hands, tracing the worn edge where countless mornings had left their mark. Steam soon curled from the kettle's spout, rising like a quiet ghost. He poured the water over a tea bag, chamomile, left in the cupboard from some long ago winter, and watched the color bloom into gold. Cradling the mug, he returned to the living room. The fire had grown steady and strong. He sat once more in the rocking chair and drew a blanket from the armrest. It smelled faintly of lavender and thyme. Outside, something shifted in the sky. A single snowflake touched the window, then another. They came hesitantly at first, like scouts sent ahead of something greater. small white stars dissolving upon contact with glass. Elias watched them without speaking. The first snow was always like this, uncertain, tender, almost shy. He took a sip of tea. Warmth spread through him, gentle and unhurried. The quiet road beyond the pines had led him here, as it always had. Not to answers, not to revelations, just to stillness. The snow began to fall more steadily now, drifting down in slow spirals that caught the firelight and shimmered like distant lanterns. The world outside softened, edges blurred. The stone wall at the edge of the field grew faint beneath a growing dusting of white. Elias felt no urgency to leave. There would be time tomorrow to decide what to do with the house. Time to shovel paths and check pipes and make plans. But tonight was not for plans. Tonight was for listening to the fire, to the wind, to the quiet breathing of a house that had known him since boyhood. He rocked gently, forward, back. The snow thickened, blanketing the road he had traveled. Beyond the pines, the world was being rewritten in white, and inside the small house at the end of the quiet road, a man sat wrapped in warmth and memory, letting the night carry him softly toward rest. The journey was not about distance. It was about return. And as the first true snowfall of the season settled over the land, Elias Rowan closed his eyes, not in sorrow, not in longing, but in deep and peaceful belonging. Outside, the road beyond the pines disappeared beneath snow. Inside, the fire burned low and steady. And the night held him gently, as though it had been waiting all along. A lantern in the window. By the time the fire settled into a steady amber glow, the snow had begun to fall in earnest. Not the hurried, sideways snow that storms sometimes carried, but a soft, deliberate drifting, as though the sky were carefully placing each flake exactly where it belonged. The world beyond the windows of the old house blurred into silver and white. The stone wall vanished first. Then the tall grass bowed and disappeared. Even the narrow drive where Elias' truck rested became a pale ribbon fading at the edges. Inside, everything felt held. Elias shifted in the rocking chair, drawing the blanket closer around his shoulders. The fire snapped softly now and then, releasing the scent of oak and faint sweetness into the air. His tea had cooled to a gentle warmth in his hands. There is a particular kind of quiet that only comes when snow begins to cover the earth. It hushes not only sound but thought. It softens the sharp corners of memory and turns even the heaviest things light. He watched the window. Flakes gathered in the corners of the glass. The porch railing grew thick with white. The old swing at the far end of the porch, untouched for months, was slowly crowned with a delicate layer. A faint breeze brushed against the house, and the eaves answered with a low wooden murmur. Elias rose carefully, placing the empty mug on the small table beside him. The room had grown warmer. The blanket slid easily from his shoulders as he walked toward the front door. He did not know why he felt drawn there, only that something in him wanted to see the snow up close, to feel it, to make certain it was real. The porch light cast a golden circle onto the growing drift outside. He unlocked the door and stepped into the night. Cold met him immediately, but it was not harsh. It felt clean, bracing, almost friendly. Snowflakes brushed against his coat and settled in his hair before melting into tiny, cool threads. He descended the porch steps slowly. The world was utterly transformed. The field that had been shadowed and dark an hour before now shimmered faintly, reflecting the porch light in muted tones. The pines stood tall at the edge of the property, their branches heavy with white lace. He walked toward the lantern post at the edge of the yard. It had stood there since his childhood, a tall iron post with a glass lantern fixed at the top. His father had lit it on winter nights when storms came through, saying it was a beacon for anyone who might lose their way on the quiet road. Lights meant to be shared, his father had often said, especially when the world turns dark. Elias reached the post and brushed snow from its base. The lantern had not been lit in months. He hesitated only a moment before opening the small metal door at its side. Inside was the old oil reservoir, half full. His father had always kept it ready, even in summer. Elias struck a match. The flame flared bright against the dark, briefly illuminating his breath in the air. He held it carefully to the wick. The lantern came alive with a soft golden bloom. It did not blaze. It did not compete with the porch light. It simply glowed, steady and unwavering. Elias stepped back. The lantern's light cast a warm circle against the snow, creating a gentle contrast between gold and silver. Snowflakes passed through it like drifting stars, momentarily radiant before dissolving into white. He stood there longer than he realized. There was something deeply reassuring about that small flame standing against the falling snow. It did not fight the storm. It did not resist the cold. It simply existed. Satisfied, Elias turned back toward the house. His footprints marked the fresh snow in a neat line behind him, a quiet record of movement in an otherwise untouched world. Inside again, he closed the door firmly and stamped the snow from his boots. The warmth welcomed him back like an old friend. He hung his coat and returned to the rocking chair, though he did not sit immediately. Instead, he stood near the window, watching the lantern burn steadily in the yard. For a fleeting moment, he imagined someone traveling that quiet road beyond the pines, a late driver, perhaps uncertain of direction. It's how the lantern would appear through the falling snow, a small promise, a sign that warmth existed nearby. He liked that thought. The fire crackled gently, pulling him back. He settled once more into the chair, letting its rhythm find him. Forward, back, the snow thickened. It no longer fell in isolated flakes, but in soft clusters that swirled lazily in the lantern's glow. The world beyond the yard was gone now, erased in white haze. He found himself thinking not only of his father, but of winters long past. He remembered being 8 years old, standing at this very window as snow piled high. His father had come up behind him then, resting broad hands on his shoulders. first snow's a gift, he'd murmured. It gives the world permission to start over. At the time, Elias had not understood, but now, as he watched the land disappear under a clean white blanket, he felt the truth of it. Snow did not erase what had been. It simply covered it for a while, allowing rest. The house seemed to breathe more deeply as the night wore on. The walls creaked softly as temperatures shifted. The pipes hummed faintly, settling into the rhythm of cold outside and warmth within. Somewhere in the attic, a gentle rustle suggested the quiet nesting of winter birds. Elias closed his eyes again. He did not sleep, not fully, but drifted into that space between waking and dream, where memory and present moment blur. He saw himself at 15, helping his father stack wood before a storm, their laughter rising in visible puffs of breath. He saw his mother in the kitchen, kneading dough for bread, flour dusting her sleeves. He heard the distant jingle of harness bells from a neighbor's horse-drawn sleigh. The images came softly, without sharpness or sorrow. They were not reminders of loss tonight. They were simply parts of him. As the fire burned lower, Elias rose once more to add another log. The movement felt unhurried, deliberate. The house seemed to approve. As the new log caught, flames climbed gently upward, restoring the golden glow to full strength. He glanced again at the lantern, still steady, still warm. The porch light flickered briefly, then held. He smiled faintly. It occurred to him then that he had not felt this at ease in months, perhaps years. In town, life had a way of pressing close, appointments, repairs, conversations that skimmed the surface but rarely settled deep. Here, there was space. Here, the only sound was snowing touching earth. He crossed the room and pulled open the old wooden chest beneath the window. Inside lay folded quilts, thick and handmade. He lifted one, a heavy patchwork of blues and greens stitched with careful hands long ago. He draped it over the back of the sofa. The act felt like preparation, not for guests, but for comfort. He imagined staying the night, not merely visiting, but sleeping here once more, listening to the wind move across the roof. The idea did not frighten him. It felt right. The clock on the mantel ticked steadily, marking time without urgency. Outside, the snow had nearly covered his footprints. The world was beginning again. He returned to the rocking chair and allowed his breathing to slow. Forward, back, back. At some point, he noticed a subtle change in the light. The lantern's glow had grown slightly brighter, not in intensity, but in clarity. The falling snow reflected it outward, amplifying its warmth against the dark. It made the yard look like a small island of safety in an endless white sea. Elias found himself wondering who might need that light tonight. Perhaps no one, perhaps everyone. He thought of the quiet road, now buried under inches of snow, of the pines standing guard, of the world beyond town, sleeping under a soft white sky. He imagined the snow reaching the windows of neighbors miles away, blanketing rooftops, silencing distant highways, the entire county wrapped in hush, the entire world perhaps. He let that thought settle gently. the lantern outside burned without complaint. And inside the small house at the end of the quiet road, Elias Rowan felt something within him settle too. Not resolution, not decision, just a steady warmth that required nothing more than presence. The snow continued to fall, patient and unending. The fire crackled softly. As the rocking chair moved in its slow, faithful arc, and in the window the lantern glowed, its golden light shining out into the winter night, offering comfort to the empty road beyond the pines, and to the man who had finally found his way back to stillness. Whispers carried by the cold wind. Somewhere past midnight, the wind found its voice. It did not howl. It did not rattle the windows or claw at the eaves. Instead, it moved in long, thoughtful breaths around the house, slipping through the pines and across the open field with a sound like distant ocean waves. Snow swirled with it, lifting briefly from the ground, dancing in pale spirals through the lantern's golden circle, then settling again in quiet surrender. As inside, Elias stirred. He had not meant to sleep, yet sleep had found him anyway, light and gentle, like a blanket drawn over tired shoulders. The rocking chair had come to rest. As the fire had dimmed to a bed of glowing embers, their soft orange light pulsing faintly in the darkened room. For a moment, he did not know where he was. Then the scent of wood smoke reached him. The steady tick of the mantel clock returned. The whisper of wind against the windows followed. He opened his eyes slowly. The room was wrapped in shadow, yet it did not feel empty. The lantern outside still cast its quiet glow through the lace curtains, painting delicate patterns across the walls. Elias rose carefully, joints stiff but willing. He crossed to the fireplace and added another log, kneeling to coax the embers back into flame. The fire responded patiently, flames unfurling in slow, golden arcs. Warmth bloomed once more. He stood and stretched, glancing toward the window. The snow had risen high against the porch steps. The railing was nearly buried. Beyond the lantern's circle, the world had dissolved into white haze and shifting wind. He felt no urgency. There was something about being snowed in, about knowing the road was impassable, that created a rare and beautiful permission. Permission to stay, permission to pause, and permission to exist without expectation. The quiet road beyond the pines had vanished entirely now, and yet Elias felt more grounded than he had in years. He walked toward the back of the house, moving through the narrow hallway that led to the small bedroom at the rear. The floorboards murmured underfoot, each one familiar in its tone. He ran his fingers lightly along the wall as he passed the old framed paintings, landscapes done by his mother in softer years, rolling hills, a red barn, a stand of pines beneath a lavender sky. In the bedroom, moonlight filtered faintly through the window, reflecting off the snow and casting a pale silver glow across the quilted bed. He paused in the doorway. The room had been left untouched since his father's passing, the bed neatly made. The nightstand holding a small brass clock and a book turned face down as though waiting to be resumed. Elias stepped inside. He sat on the edge of the bed and listened. The wind circled the house again, brushing against the far wall. The roof gave a soft creak in response. Somewhere in the attic, a gentle thump suggested snow sliding into place. It was not a lonely sound. It was the sound of a house alive in winter. He lay back against the pillows, boots still on, hands folded loosely across his chest. The quilt beneath him held the faint scent of lavender and cedar, the scent of years folded into fabric. He closed his eyes, and there, in the soft darkness, the whispers began. Not voices, not words exactly, but impressions carried on memory and wind. He remembered being 10 years old, standing outside in a storm much like this one. Snow had come fast that year, blanketing the yard in a single night. He had woken before dawn and pressed his face to this very window, astonished at how the world could change so completely while he slept. His father had joined him, silent at first. Then he had said, "Listen close, Eli. Snow talks if you let it." Elias had laughed then, dismissing the idea, but his father had shaken his head gently. It talks about quiet things, about patience, about starting again. Now, decades later, Elias listened. The wind carried soft rhythms along the walls. Snow slid from the roof in muffled sighs. Branches brushed lightly against glass. It felt almost like conversation, low and steady. He rolled onto his side, facing the window. The lantern's glow flickered faintly through drifting snow, casting a halo that seemed suspended in the night. It had burned for hours now without faltering. He wondered how long the oil would last. A strange comfort filled him knowing it shone there still, unattended, unwavering. He rose from the bed, suddenly restless, and made his way back to the living room. The fire was strong again, casting warm light across the braided rug and worn furniture. Shadows danced gently against the ceiling beams. He walked to the bookshelf near the hearth. Rows of old volumes lined the shelves, classics his father had collected over the years. Histories, adventure tales, a few slim poetry collections. Elias ran his finger along the spines until he found one he recognized well. A thin book of winter poems, edges worn smooth from use. He pulled it down and settled into the rocking chair once more. Forward, back, back. He opened the book at random and read by firelight. The words spoke of frost on window panes, of fields asleep beneath snow, of lanterns glowing against night. They spoke of journeys not measured in miles, but in moments of stillness. His eyelids grew heavy again. The wind deepened slightly, pressing more firmly against the house, but it did not threaten. It sounded almost protective, as though it were circling the home, keeping watch. Elias closed the book and rested it in his lap. He thought of the road beyond the pines, of how it would look come morning, buried under a smooth, unbroken blanket, of how no tire tracks would mark it, no footprints. For the first time in a long while, he felt unburdened by the idea of forward motion. There would be no leaving tonight, no arriving either, only being. The whispers continued, not outside alone, but within him. Regrets he had carried for years seemed smaller here. Conversations left unfinished felt less urgent. Even the ache of loss softened under the steady rhythm of wind and flame. He realized something then. Grief, like snow, does not erase what was built. It covers it gently for a time, allowing rest. Beneath the white, the earth remains. The house remained. He remained. The lantern burned. Outside, the storm reached its quiet height. Snow felt thick and heavy now, descending in large, slow flakes that moved almost vertically in the wind's lull. The yard was transformed into a seamless expanse of white, broken only by the iron post of the lantern and the faint outline of the porch roof. The world had narrowed beautifully. No distant headlights, no passing engines, only wind, snow, firelight. Elias leaned his head back against the chair and let his breathing align with the rhythm around him. Inhale, exhale, forward, back. The whispers grew softer as fatigue deepened. He drifted again, not into sharp dreams, but into a warm haze where memory and present blended seamlessly. He dreamed of walking the quiet road as a boy, snow crunching beneath boots too large for his feet. He dreamed of his father's steady hand guiding him across icy patches. He dreamed of the lantern glowing bright against storm-dark skies. But most of all, he dreamed of warmth. Of coming inside after cold, of removing heavy coats and feeling fingers thaw beside a crackling fire. The wind eased slightly toward dawn. Snow continued to fall, but its urgency had passed. The storm had given what it came to give. Inside the small house beyond the pines, Elias slept at last. Not in the bedroom this time, but in the rocking chair by the fire, quilt drawn loosely over his lap. The lantern outside burned low but steady. Its light, though softened by drifting snow, still marked the house's presence in the vast white night. And as the cold wind carried its final whispers across the field, it left behind not chill, but clarity. The quiet road lay hidden beneath snow. The pines stood silent and strong. And within the warm circle of firelight and lantern glow, a man rested, held gently by memory, by winter, and by the steady promise that even the coldest nights carry their own kind of peace. The long way home under a silver sky. Morning did not arrive all at once. It unfolded slowly, first as a thinning of darkness, then as a faint silver sheen at the edges of the curtains. The fire had settled into a quiet bed of ash and ember, breathing out its last gentle warmth. As the house felt still and hushed, wrapped in the kind of silence that follows a long snowfall, Elias woke without knowing why. For a moment he remained perfectly still in the rocking chair, quilt draped over him, listening to the quiet. The wind had gone, not faded, not softened, gone. In its place was a silence so complete it felt almost sacred. He opened his eyes. The room was washed in pale light. He rose carefully, setting the quilt aside, and crossed to the front window. The world beyond had transformed into something nearly unrecognizable. The yard was a smooth white sea. The porch steps had vanished entirely beneath drifts. The lantern post stood alone like a marker in an endless field of snow, its flame still alive but faint in the growing daylight. Beyond that, the pines were heavy with white, their branches bowed in graceful arcs. The sky above them shimmered in soft silver-blue tones, clouds thinning into long translucent streaks. It was not a bright morning. It was a silver one. Elias rested his hand against the cool window pane. The quiet road beyond the pines was gone from sight, swallowed whole by the storm. No tire tracks marked its path. No evidence of travel remained. The world had been given back to stillness. He felt a small, unexpected smile lift the corner of his mouth. There would be no easy departure today. He moved toward the fireplace and stirred the ashes gently, adding kindling and one final log. The flame caught slowly, reluctantly, but soon warmth began to return to the room. In the kitchen, he found bread wrapped carefully in a cloth and a small jar of honey tucked into the cupboard. His father had always kept extra supplies before winter storms. It seemed Elias had inherited the habit without realizing it. He toasted the bread lightly over the fire and spread honey across its surface. Simple, warm, enough. He carried his breakfast to the window and stood watching the morning settle over the land. Sunlight began to push faintly through the thinning clouds, not in golden rays, but in diffused silver beams that softened everything they touched. The snow reflected it gently, creating a luminous glow that seemed to rise from the ground itself. The lantern outside flickered one last time before finally surrendering to daylight. Its flame died quietly, having kept its vigil through the long night. Elias felt a strange sense of gratitude toward it. After finishing his breakfast, he pulled on his coat and boots, wrapping a wool scarf around his neck. The door resisted slightly when he opened it, snow pressing firmly against its base. Cold air rushed in bright and bracing. He stepped out onto the porch, boots sinking immediately into deep powder. The snow was nearly to his knees at the top step. He laughed softly, the sound absorbed almost instantly by the white world around him. He began clearing a path with his boots, moving slowly, deliberately. There was no rush. Each step left a deep, crisp imprint behind him. The snow squeaked faintly beneath his weight, a sound only fresh snow makes, delicate and pure. When he reached the lantern post, he brushed snow gently from its glass and closed the small metal door. "Thank you," he murmured, unsure why the words felt necessary. From there, he turned his gaze toward the pines. A thought stirred within him, not urgent, not demanding, but steady. He wanted to walk, not to leave, just to follow the road for a while. The quiet road beyond the pines had always been a place of reflection. As a boy, he had walked it countless times after storms, watching how the snow transformed the landscape. As a young man, he had driven it in restless moments, seeking clarity. Today, he would take the long way home under a silver sky. He trudged toward the edge of the yard where the road should be. It took effort to reach it, snow rising high around his boots, but the exertion felt good, honest, grounding. When he reached the invisible line where asphalt lay buried beneath white, he paused. There was no sign of road, only a gentle depression where the surface lay hidden. He stepped forward anyway. The snow was slightly firmer here, packed lightly by wind during the night. Each step felt deliberate, purposeful. He walked slowly, following memory more than sight. The pines rose on either side of him once more, their branches heavy and still. The world between them glowed faintly silver in the morning light. There is something deeply comforting about walking through fresh snow alone. Every sound is muted, every breath visible. The world narrows to the rhythm of steps and the soft whisper of fabric against cold air. Elias felt his thoughts settle with each stride. He did not think about town. He did not think about obligations waiting beyond the storm. He thought only of the moment, the hush, the cold, the steady beat of his heart. The road curved gently, just as it always had. At one point, he stopped and looked back. His footprints stretched behind him in a single, winding line from the house to where he stood. No other marks disturbed the surface. He felt strangely, both very small and deeply anchored. The sky brightened further, clouds thinning into long wisps that caught the sun's diffused glow. It was not yet blue, but it held promise. He continued walking until he reached the bend where the pines thinned and the view opened slightly toward distant hills. There, he stopped. The hills were blanketed in white, rising gently against the horizon. The silver light touched them softly, outlining their curves with quiet grace. He remembered standing here years ago with his father after another storm. They had watched deer move cautiously across the far field, their hooves sinking into snow as steam rose from their bodies in the cold. Storms pass, his father had said then. But what they leave behind can be beautiful if you're willing to look. Elias understood those words more fully now. He closed his eyes and breathed deeply. The air felt clean, almost sweet. It carried no scent of smoke, no trace of town. It was only pine and cold and open sky. He could stay out here for hours, he realized. And yet he did not need to. The walk was not about distance. It was about return. He turned slowly and began making his way back toward the house. The journey felt different now, not like retreat, but like completion. His footprints guided him easily, each one fitting perfectly into the path he had already made. When the house came into view again, framed by snow-laden trees, something inside him shifted gently. It did not feel like a place of memory anymore. It felt like a place of belonging. The lantern stood dark but dignified. The porch roof glistened under growing light. Smoke rose faintly from the chimney, a thin ribbon against the silver sky. Elias reached the yard and paused before stepping back onto the porch. He looked once more at the road beyond the pines, buried, silent, beautiful. The long way home had not required miles. It had required presence. Inside, warmth greeted him again. He removed his coat and boots, setting them neatly by the door. The fire burned steadily, filling the room with golden comfort that contrasted gently against the pale morning outside. He settled into the rocking chair once more, but this time he did not drift towards sleep. He simply watched. The silver sky slowly shifted toward faint blue. Snow sparkled softly as sunlight strengthened. Somewhere in the distance, a branch released its burden of snow with a soft, muffled thump. Life stirred gently beneath the white. Elias felt no pressure to decide anything yet. The road would be cleared in time. The town would wake. Responsibilities would return. But for now, he allowed himself the gift of staying. The long way home under a silver sky had brought him not to an ending, but to a beginning he had not expected. A quiet understanding that sometimes the journey we think we are taking outward is really a journey inward. The house beyond the pines no longer felt like a place he had left behind. It felt like a place he had rediscovered. And as the morning light deepened and the world glittered softly beneath its new blanket of snow, Elias Rowan sat wrapped in warmth and quiet certainty. The night journey before the snow had brought him back, and the silver sky promised that what lay ahead would be walked with steadier steps, softer thoughts, and a heart finally at rest. When the first snow finally fell, the house felt different in the daylight, not changed, just revealed. Morning light has a way of showing details that night keeps gently hidden. The grain of the wooden floor seemed richer. The braided rug appeared more colorful. Even the old fireplace, with its soot-darkened bricks, looked sturdy and proud rather than quiet and worn. Outside, the snow shimmered beneath a widening blue sky. The storm had moved on during the early hours, leaving behind a world polished and still. The air was crisp, but no longer restless. The wind had retreated to a whisper. The trees stood upright again, their branches relieved of heavy burdens. Elias stood at the window for a long time, hands resting loosely at his sides. The road beyond the pines was no longer visible. It existed only in memory now, hidden under a smooth white blanket stretching toward town. For the first time since arriving, he thought about what would happen next. The driveway would need clearing. The porch steps would have to be shoveled. If he stayed, he would need supplies. And yet none of those thoughts felt urgent. They floated gently, like flakes once did in the night, landing softly but not demanding attention. He turned away from the window and began moving through the house with quiet purpose. There was comfort in tending to small things. He opened the curtains fully, letting daylight pour in. The rooms brightened instantly. Dust motes danced in the beams of sun. The house seemed to straighten itself under the attention. In the kitchen, he brewed a fresh pot of coffee. The familiar aroma filled the air, blending with the lingering scent of wood smoke. He carried a mug back to the front room and sat near the window again, this time in the sturdy chair by the bookshelf rather than the rocking chair. The fire had burned down to glowing embers. He added one more log, though the room was already warm enough. Outside, the snow sparkled as if dusted with fine glass. A small movement near the pines caught his eye. At first, he thought it was wind shifting snow from a branch, but then he saw it clearly, a pair of deer stepping cautiously from the tree line. They moved slowly, testing the deep snow with careful hooves. Their coats blended with the landscape, soft browns against white. Steam rose faintly from their breath in the cold air. Elias leaned closer to the glass. The deer paused near the edge of the yard, ears twitching, sensing the quiet. They were not afraid, they were simply attentive. One of them lowered its head to nibble at something beneath the snow. The other stood watch, still and alert. Elias smiled. Winter belonged to everyone. He felt grateful that the house offered warmth not just to him, but to whatever wandered nearby. After finishing his coffee, he decided it was time to clear the steps. He bundled up again and stepped outside into the bright morning. The cold felt gentler now, balanced by sunlight. He found a shovel in the shed beside the house and began working carefully, pushing snow from the porch steps in steady motions. Each stroke revealed wood beneath. The simple act grounded him further. Shoveling snow has its own rhythm. Push, lift, release, repeat. It was not difficult work, but it required patience. Elias found himself breathing in sync with the motion. As the steps cleared, the porch began to reappear. The railing emerged next, followed by the swing at the far end. The lantern post stood proudly in the yard, now completely covered at its base but visible above the drift. He worked his way down the steps and created a path toward the driveway. With each cleared section, the world regained shape. By the time he reached the truck, sunlight had grown stronger. The sky deepened into a clean winter blue. He brushed snow from the windshield, revealing the glass beneath. The truck looked like it had rested peacefully rather than endured a storm. As he worked, he noticed something subtle. The silence felt different from the night before. Night silence had been enveloping, soft, and protective. Day silence was open, expansive, and clear. Both were peaceful, but in distinct ways. When the driveway was mostly clear, he paused to rest. He leaned on the shovel and looked back at the house. Smoke drifted gently from the chimney. The windows reflected the sky, glowing faintly. It struck him that the house did not seem lonely anymore. It seemed alive, not because of movement or noise, but because it was being used again, because warmth had returned, because light burned inside it. He thought of his father's voice, light meant to be shared. Elias realized that the lantern, though now unlit in daylight, had done exactly that during the storm. It had marked the home. It had declared presence. Perhaps that was enough. He finished clearing the driveway and returned the shovel to the shed. Inside the house once more, he removed his gloves and sat at the kitchen table. The quiet felt comfortable. He considered his options for the coming days. He could stay a while longer. There was no rush. The house was solid, the supplies sufficient, and the town would wait. The idea of leaving did not feel heavy anymore. It felt optional. That realization surprised him. For years, he had measured life in obligations, places to go, tasks to complete, structures to build. But here, in this snow-covered sanctuary, time felt more generous. He decided to take another walk later, perhaps deeper along the road once it was cleared. For now, he allowed himself to simply be. The afternoon sunlight softened, shifting toward a pale gold as it angled lower in the sky. Snow on the branches began to melt slightly in the warmth, dripping in delicate intervals onto the ground below. The sound was gentle and rhythmic. Drip, pause, drip. He found it calming. Later, as evening approached, Elias stepped outside once more. The sky had cleared completely now, revealing a vast expanse of blue turning slowly toward twilight. The snow glowed in the fading light. He walked to the edge of the yard where the road lay buried. He did not attempt to uncover it. Instead, he stood quietly and observed how the storm had reshaped the landscape. The pines formed a dark frame against the snow. The hills beyond shimmered softly. The house stood behind him, steady and warm. He felt no desire to rush anywhere. When he finally returned inside, he lit the lantern again, though it was not yet necessary. There was something satisfying about seeing it glow at dusk. The flame inside responded instantly, casting a familiar golden circle over the snow. Even in calm weather, the lantern seemed to promise welcome. Inside, he prepared a simple dinner, soup warmed on the stove, bread toasted carefully. The routine felt natural, almost ceremonial. As he ate, he considered how the house would feel tomorrow and the next day. Perhaps he would stay through the week, perhaps longer. The thought did not carry weight. It carried possibility. Later that night, after the sky had turned fully dark once again, he returned to the rocking chair. The fire burned low but steady. Outside, the lantern glowed gently against the winter sky. He rocked slowly, forward, back, forward, back. The house felt complete in a way it had not before. Not because it was full of furniture or light, but because it had been lived in again. Because laughter had briefly echoed in memory. Because warmth had been restored. The snow outside lay thick and undisturbed, reflecting the faint glow from the windows. Elias felt a deep, restful gratitude settle within him. The first snow had not been a storm to survive. It had been a bridge, from old to new, from memory to presence, from loneliness to belonging. He closed his eyes as the fire whispered and the lantern shone beyond the glass. Outside, the night was calm. Inside, the house glowed with warmth and quiet life. And as sleep approached gently once more, Elias understood that sometimes the first snow does not end a journey. It begins one, a journey measured not in miles, but in moments of stillness, in lantern light against darkness, in footsteps across fresh white earth, and in the simple comfort of knowing you have arrived exactly where you were meant to be, the hearth that stayed. The second night after the snow felt even quieter than the first, not because the world had changed, but because it had settled. During the day, sunlight had softened the edges of everything. The snow sparkled, the pines stood tall again, and the quiet road remained hidden beneath its white blanket. By evening, the sky had cleared into a wide, open dome of deepening blue. No storm clouds lingered. No wind returned to test the windows. It was the kind of night that made the stars seem closer. Elias stood at the front door just after dusk, looking out across the yard. The lantern was lit again, though the air was calm now. It did not need to fight darkness. It simply existed within it. The fire inside the house glowed warmly behind him, casting soft, golden light across the living room. He stepped outside anyway. There is something about winter nights that invites brief moments of stillness under the sky. The cold sharpens awareness. Breath becomes visible. The mind slows naturally. Elias walked carefully along the cleared path he had shoveled earlier. The snow on either side rose like pale walls, smooth and untouched. His footprints from the morning had long since blended into the landscape. The yard felt transformed from field into sanctuary. He paused near the lantern post and looked up. Stars shimmered above, bright and steady in the crisp air. The Milky Way stretched faintly across the sky, subtle but present. The snow reflected enough light to give the night a gentle glow. He realized something simple in that moment. The storm had passed, not just outside, but within him. He exhaled slowly, watching his breath drift upward and disappear. Then he returned inside. The warmth embraced him instantly. The house held heat now in a way it hadn't during the storm. The fire crackled with confidence. Elias removed his coat and hung it neatly. He had begun organizing small things again, placing shoes side by side, stacking firewood carefully, wiping down surfaces. Not out of necessity, out of appreciation. The house responded to attention. It felt less like an empty structure and more like a companion. He prepared tea again and settled near the fireplace, this time sitting on the rug in front of it rather than in a chair. The warmth radiated across his legs and hands. He leaned back slightly, resting his palms against the floor. The house creaked softly, adjusting to temperature shifts. He liked those sounds. They reminded him that buildings, like people, are alive in their own quiet way. Outside, the night remained perfectly still. Inside, the fire burned. Time moved gently. He thought about the road beyond the pines. Tomorrow, he would consider clearing it further. Perhaps he would drive into town, or perhaps not. The thought did not create tension. Instead, it felt like a door left open. That realization made him breathe easier. Later, when fatigue returned, he decided to try sleeping in the bedroom again. The quilt lay neatly on the bed where he had placed it earlier. The room was cooler than the living room, but not cold. He slipped beneath the covers and turned off the bedside lamp. Darkness settled, but it was not heavy. From the hallway, faint light from the fireplace still reached the doorway. The wind did not move. The house was quiet in a stable, reassuring way. Elias closed his eyes. Sleep arrived slowly, as it does when peace is present. There was no urgency in his mind, no unresolved tension. Just steady breathing and warmth. He dreamed lightly. In his dream, the house stood surrounded by snow, but the snow did not press against it. Instead, it curved gently around the foundation like a protective ring. The lantern shone bright, guiding not travelers but memories. As in the dream, his father stood at the edge of the yard, not as a distant figure, but as a calm presence. He did not speak. He simply nodded once, an acknowledgement. Elias felt no sadness in the dream, only continuity. When he woke near dawn, the sky outside was beginning to pale again. He lay still for a moment, listening. No wind, no storm, just quiet. He rose and walked to the window. Morning light was returning softly, spreading across the snow in cool tones. The world looked refreshed but unchanged. He dressed and returned to the living room, where the fire had dimmed overnight. He added wood and stoked the embers back to life. Routine now felt natural. After a simple breakfast, he decided to explore further along the road once more. Not to leave, but to understand how far the snow extended. He bundled up and stepped outside. The air was crisp and invigorating. The yard glowed under morning light. The snow was untouched except for his path and the faint signs of wildlife from the previous day. He walked beyond the lantern this time, following the direction of the buried road. Each step was steady. The snow supported him gently. The pines grew closer as he advanced. Their trunks were dark against white ground, branches layered like overlapping hands. He moved carefully around bends he remembered from summer drives. Without visible pavement, the road felt different, less like infrastructure, more like memory beneath snow. He walked until the trees thinned again near the open hills. There he stopped. The view stretched outward in wide calmness. Everything was blanketed in white. The horizon line appeared soft and distant. He felt no need to go further. Instead, he stood quietly, letting the winter air fill his lungs. This place had shaped his childhood. It had witnessed family winters, long evenings, quiet conversations. And now it felt renewed. He turned back. Walking home no longer felt like returning from somewhere. It felt like returning to somewhere. When he reached the house again, sunlight had grown warmer. The snow sparkled intensely under it. He paused at the porch and noticed something small. Near the steps where he had cleared the path, tiny footprints marked the snow. Birds had returned. A small group hopped near the edge of the yard, pecking delicately at seeds that must have surfaced during his shoveling. Their movements were quick and light. Elias smiled. Winter was not emptiness. It was adjustment. Inside, he removed his boots and hung his coat. The fire remained steady. He sat at the table with a notebook he found in a drawer. It had once belonged to his father. On the first page were handwritten notes about home repairs, seasonal preparations, and simple reflections. Elias traced the handwriting gently. He did not feel loss. He felt continuation. He picked up a pen and wrote a single line beneath his father's last note. The first snow came and the house stayed warm. He closed the notebook afterward and placed it back in the drawer. As afternoon light shifted, he felt a calm fatigue settle into his body. Not exhaustion, just contented quiet. He returned to the rocking chair near the fireplace and wrapped the quilt around his shoulders. Outside, the snow began to glimmer again as the sun lowered. The lantern would soon be lit once more. But for now, daylight held everything in gentle clarity. Elias rocked slowly. Forward, back, forward. Back, he felt no urgency to leave the house, no pressure to plan beyond the present day. The storm had rearranged the landscape, but it had also rearranged him. The hearth continued to burn. The snow lay thick and peaceful. And under the silver-blue sky turning gradually toward evening, the house beyond the pines stood warm, patient, and steady, its windows glowing softly as another quiet night approached. Elias closed his eyes again, not because he was tired, but because he was at ease. The hearth would stay. The snow would remain, and the long way home, once traveled through storm and silence, had brought him exactly where he needed to be. Inside warmth, inside memory, inside the gentle rhythm of winter's embrace.
There's nothing else you need to listen for now. Just let your breathing stay slow and easy. If you're still awake, that's okay. And if you're drifting off, let yourself go gently. I'll be right here next time. Rest well and good night.